They trained in ways modern science would call mistakes. They did too much volume. They skipped formal periodization. They chased the pump like it was gold. And they won everything. They built physiques that modern bodybuilders studied decades later. They dominated stages when competition was brutal and unforgiving. So here's the question nobody asks. If they trained wrong, why did they win? By the middle of this video, you'll realize the real reason. It wasn't the program. It was something most modern lifters completely overlook. Let's start with what they got wrong. Old school bodybuilders violated nearly every rule modern science now holds sacred. They did marathon training sessions that lasted 90 minutes or longer. They hit the same muscle groups with 15, 20, sometimes 25 sets. They trained chest on Monday, back on Tuesday, legs on Wednesday. Then they did it again the next week. For years, modern training science would call this junk volume. It would call this inefficient. It would say you're leaving gains on the table. But here's what modern science often forgets to mention. These men built legendary physiques doing exactly this. Sergio Oliva, Zane, Arnold Schwarzenegger. They weren't flukes. They were the standard. So what's going on here? The first thing old school bodybuilders got wrong was volume. By today's standards, they did way too much. A typical chest workout might include flat bench press for 5 sets, incline press for 4 sets, dumbbell flies for 4 sets, cable crossovers for 3 sets, dips for 3 sets, maybe pullovers to finish. That's nearly 20 sets just for chest. Modern science says you need maybe 10 to 15 hard sets per week. These guys did that in one session. But here's why it still worked. Most of that volume wasn't true max effort. It was controlled pump work. It was practice. Half of those sets were building skill and reinforcing technique. The weight was moderate. The form was strict. They weren't grinding every rep to failure. They were teaching their muscles to contract harder and feel the work. That kind of volume builds tolerance over time. And most of these lifters were young, active, and slept well. They didn't have desk jobs draining them for 8 hours. They didn't scroll phones until midnight. Their recovery capacity was higher than most modern lifters assume. Here's another layer. Old school lifters auto-regulated without even knowing the term. They didn't use apps or a spreadsheet, but when their strength dipped, they backed off naturally. When their elbows felt hot, they took lighter weeks. When their appetite surged, they pushed harder. This wasn't formal periodization. It was instinct built through years of consistent training. And that instinct kept them safe from chronic overtraining. Plus, their split routines managed fatigue intelligently. Chest day crushed the pecs, but the back rested. The legs recovered. The body had time to rebuild one area while others worked. So even though total weekly volume looked insane, local muscle fatigue stayed manageable. The gym environment also played a role. Old gyms had no phones, no mirrors every 5 feet, no distractions. Time moved slower. A 90-minute session felt normal because you were locked in. You weren't checking Instagram between sets. You were resting, focusing, preparing for the next lift. Volume only becomes junk when effort drops. And effort never dropped in those gyms. Let's talk about periodization, or rather, the lack of it. Old school bodybuilders didn't use training blocks. They didn't deload every 4th week, like a spreadsheet told them to. They didn't track tonnage or calculate fatigue indices. By modern standards, this is wrong. Science says you need structured progression and recovery phases. But old school lifters had their own version. They called it seasons. Off-season meant building. Pre-contest meant refining. That was their periodization. And it worked because it matched human biology. You can't peak year-round. Nobody can. But you can build for months, then sharpen for weeks. That rhythm is ancient. It doesn't need a fancy name. It just needs consistency. When strength dropped, they didn't panic. They took it easy that week. Not because an app told them to, because their body told them to. When the pump came back strong, they pushed again. This kind of auto-regulation is smarter than most algorithms. It responds to real-time feedback, sleep quality, mood, joint feel, appetite, all the variables that spreadsheets miss. Old school lifters also peaked by observation. They looked in the mirror. They watched their pump. They practiced posing every day. Posing revealed weak points faster than any measurement. If your side chest looked flat, you knew it. You added incline work. You added flies. You fixed it. No lab required. This approach had one massive advantage. It forced focus. When you're 12 weeks from a show, you're not experimenting. You're executing. You're doing what works. That deadline pressure created intensity modern lifters rarely experience. It's easy to train hard when there's no consequence for slacking. It's different when you're stepping on stage next to the best in the world. That pressure forced them to peak. And they did it without complex programming. They did it with effort, observation, and relentless consistency. Now let's address exercise selection. Old school bodybuilders use movements modern trainers avoid. Behind the neck presses, deep flies, heavy pullovers, upright rows with a narrow grip. By today's standards, these are risky. Some are considered injury risks, and that's partly true. Some lifters did pay a price later in life. But here's what gets overlooked. Many old school lifters use these exercises carefully. They didn't ego lift them. They used moderate weight. They controlled the eccentric. They adjusted the range to fit their structure. A behind-the-neck press done with perfect control and appropriate load isn't necessarily dangerous. It becomes dangerous when modern lifters copy it with heavy weight and bad form. The exercise wasn't magic. The consistency was. Doing the same movement for years builds skill. Your nervous system adapts. Your joints adapt. Your muscles learn to stabilize the pattern. That adaptation is what made these movements work. Not some secret old school trick. Just time and attention. And when something didn't work, they dropped it. They tried dips and their shoulder hurt. They stopped. They didn't need a study. They had feedback. Pain is data. They listened. Here's one of the most misunderstood aspects. Old school bodybuilders chase a pump. They superset. They used short rest periods. They squeeze at the top. They flex between sets. Modern lifters call this bro science. They say the pump is just water and glycogen. It doesn't mean growth. But old school lifters knew something science is only now confirming. The pump is feedback. It tells you if the target muscle did the work. If your chest pumps after bench press, you recruited your pecs well. If it doesn't, maybe your triceps took over. The pump was a real-time quality check. And pump work increased volume without destroying your joints. After heavy pressing, they'd finish with cable flies or dumbbell work. Light weight, high reps, full stretch, full contraction. This didn't replace heavy lifting. It supplemented it. It kept tension on the target without the joint stress of another max effort set. That's not bro science. That's smart training. The burn they chased was often a controlled way to approach failure. Not random pain, not ego, just pushing the muscle until it couldn't contract cleanly anymore. That kind of intensity, repeated over years, builds serious size. Let's talk about training intensity. Old school bodybuilders trained close to failure constantly. Almost every set ended with struggle, with forced reps, with partners helping them squeeze out two more. By modern standards, this is excessive. Science warns about fatigue accumulation and recovery debt, but here's why it still worked. Many of these lifters had fewer external stressors. No demanding office jobs. No 3-hour commutes. No kids' soccer schedules. Simpler lives. More recovery capacity. And their near failure. Sets were often more controlled than people assume. They didn't grind every rep into oblivion. They trained hard, but smart. A partner would help after the last clean rep, not 5 reps before. That spotting culture enforced quality. Bad reps didn't count. Only clean reps counted. Then you got help for 1 or 2 more. Then it ended. This is very different from modern gym culture, where people grind ugly reps for ego. Old school intensity was hard, but it had standards, and that made it sustainable. Here's a pattern modern lifters miss. Old school bodybuilders didn't measure everything. No HRV scores. No step counters. no recovery algorithms. By science-based standards, this is wrong. You're supposed to track, measure, optimize. But here's what happened instead. They measured what mattered. Weight on the bar, reps completed, body weight, mirror, mood. That's it. And that simplicity became their superpower. Less data meant less doubt, less overthinking, less paralysis by analysis. If you hit more reps this week than last week, you're progressing. If your body weight climbs while your waist stays tight, you're building muscle. Simple, clear, actionable. This kind of feedback loop builds consistency. And consistency compounds harder than perfect metrics ever could. A man writes +1 rep in his notebook and smiles like he won money. Because he did. He just proved he's stronger than last week. That's tangible progress. That's motivation that lasts. Modern lifters often know more, but grow less. They track tonnage, volume load, training stress scores. They adjust variables weekly. But they don't execute with the same consistency. Why? Because more information creates more decision points. More decision points create more friction. More friction kills adherence. Old school lifters had one decision: show up and work hard. That clarity made them unstoppable. A simple logbook was enough. Some track body weight daily in a beat-up notebook. That was the only data they needed. Weight going up while training hard? Keep eating. Weight stuck while training hard? Eat more. Weight going up too fast? Pull back slightly. This level of simplicity sounds stupid until you realize how well it worked. The best plan executed consistently beats the perfect plan executed occasionally. Every single time. Now we're at the middle. And here's the strongest reveal. Old school bodybuilders didn't win because of their programs. They won because of their culture. This is what modern training science almost never addresses: the enforcement mechanism. Old school gyms were small, tight-knit. Everyone knew everyone. You didn't hide in the corner with headphones. You trained in front of people. And those people held standards. If you quit early, they saw it. If you skipped a session, they noticed. If your form got sloppy, they called it out. That social pressure was stronger than any motivation video. You didn't want to be the guy who quit early. You didn't want to be the guy who made excuses. Your identity was tied to showing up and performing. That a level of enforcement modern lifters rarely experience. Today's gyms are anonymous. You can ghost for weeks and nobody cares. You can half-rep your way through a workout and nobody says a word. Old school gyms didn't allow that. The culture demanded effort, and that demand created results. Training partners were part of the system. You didn't train alone if you were serious. You had a partner. Maybe two. They spotted you. They pushed you. They competed with you, not in a toxic way, in a brotherhood way. If your partner hit 8 reps, you tried for 9. If he added weight, you matched it. That rivalry forced progression. It forced intensity. It forced you to show up even when you didn't feel like it, because your partner was counting on you, and you weren't going to let him down. This social contract created consistency that no app can replicate. A veteran lifter nods when you finish a hard set. That nod becomes your motivation for months, because it means you earned his respect. That respect was currency in old school gyms. And you didn't earn it with talk. You earned it with iron. The environment itself enforced effort. Old gyms were rough. No air conditioning. Concrete floors. Rusty bars. Basic equipment. Some machines were homemade, welded together in someone's garage. By modern standards, these conditions are wrong. Science says comfort optimizes performance. But old school lifters discovered something deeper. Less comfort meant more focus. No distractions. No excuses. Just you and the weight. Minimal tools forced mastery. You couldn't blame the equipment. You had to make it work. And somehow, that hardship toughened them. It built mental resilience alongside physical strength. When you train in a hot, cramped gym with clanging iron, you develop a different relationship with discomfort. You stop avoiding it. You embrace it. And that mindset transfers to everything. Contest prep, dieting, posing practice. The gym became a crucible that forged discipline. So here's the uncomfortable truth modern science doesn't want to admit. Culture beats optimization. A mediocre program executed with relentless intensity inside a culture that demands effort will outperform the perfect program executed half-heartedly in isolation. Old-school bodybuilders had that culture. Modern lifters mostly don't. And that's why old-school training worked despite violating modern rules. The rules were never the point. The enforcement was the point. What's stronger, an optimal plan or a culture that forces execution? The answer is obvious when you look at the results. Let's keep going. Old-school bodybuilders copied magazine routines. This seems wrong, right? Science says you need personalization, individual programming, custom splits. But here's what actually happened. The best lifters did customize. Just quietly. They'd start with Arnold's chest routine from a magazine. Then they'd adjust. If incline didn't pump their upper chest, they'd swap it for dumbbell presses. If their side chest pose looked flat, they'd add extra fly work for 8 weeks. They used the routine as a template, not a law, and they learned through trial. Keep what grows you, drop what hurts you. This kind of experimentation built intuition. After 5 years of consistent training, you know your body better than any coach. You know which exercises feel right, which angles hit your weak points, which rep ranges make you grow. That intuition came from doing the work, not reading about it. Posing practice revealed everything. You'd hit a side chest in the mirror and see exactly what needed work. No lab required, just brutal honesty and a willingness to fix it. Frequency is another area where old-school lifters broke modern rules. Some hit body parts once per week. Others hit them 3 times per week. By science-based standards, there's an optimal frequency. But old-school lifters proved both extremes can work. Why? Because frequency is just one variable. Effort matters more. A bro split hitting chest once weekly can build serious size if that session is thorough and consistent. You're doing 20 sets. You're pushing to failure. You're controlling every rep. Then you let it recover for 7 days. That works. Meanwhile, full body routines done 3 times per week also work. Because you're hitting chest 3 times, but with lower volume per session. More practice, more skill development, more frequent growth stimulus. Both approaches work because both emphasize effort and repetition. The old school lesson isn't that one frequency is best. It's that consistency beats frequency. Show up, work hard, repeat. The exact schedule matters less than you think. Old school training conditions also made them tougher. They trained in heat. They wore Chuck Taylors or boots because proper gym shoes didn't exist yet. They used rough bars that tore their hands. They didn't have lifting straps or fancy grips. These conditions sound terrible, but they force adaptation. Your grip got stronger because it had to. Your core got tougher because equipment demanded it. Your mental game improved because comfort wasn't an option. And the small gym culture created accountability. Everyone watched your set. You couldn't quit early there. Not when the veterans are standing 5 feet away. That environmental pressure enforced standards. It made quitting socially unacceptable. And that social pressure built discipline that carried over into every area of life. Pre-contest, old-school bodybuilders often did what modern science calls too much cardio. Long walks, bike rides, jumping rope, combined with heavy training and low calories. Science says this risks muscle loss. It says you need to minimize cardio and maximize recovery. But old school lifters still kept their muscle. Why? Because their protein intake was high and consistent. Steak, eggs, fish, chicken, cottage cheese, every single day. They had years of muscle base that didn't disappear in 12 weeks. And they adjusted training intensity to match their energy. If cardio was high, they didn't also destroy themselves with ultra-heavy lifting. They found balance through feel. Not science, not formulas, just observation. Am I holding muscle? Is my strength stable? Then I'm fine. That pragmatism kept them safe. And walking was their primary cardio tool. Low impact, easy to recover from, done daily for months. It worked because it was sustainable, not because it was optimal. Diet is another area where old school simplicity beat modern complexity. They didn't calculate macros to the gram. They didn't track fiber or micronutrients in apps. They ate the same foods repeatedly. Eggs, steak, rice, potatoes, oatmeal, milk. Boring, right? But that boredom was a weapon. Simple diets remove decision fatigue. You're not wondering what to eat. You know, chicken and rice. Every day, that predictability made outcomes clear. If body weight isn't moving, eat more chicken. If it's moving too fast, eat less rice. Simple, and repetition build adherence. When food isn't exciting, you eat for function, not pleasure. That mindset prevents overeating. It prevents binging. It creates discipline. Meal prep existed before it had a name. Coolers in the car. Tupperware packed the night before. Meals planned like work shifts. This level of preparation made consistency automatic. You didn't rely on willpower. You relied on systems. And systems beat motivation. Here's what ties everything together. Old school bodybuilders weren't training optimally by today's metrics, but they were doing something more important. They were training with intent. Every session mattered. Every rep had purpose. They weren't going through motions. They were building something. That mindset changes everything. It turns volume into quality. It turns frequency into skill. It turns effort into growth. Modern lifters often train reactively. They follow the program. They hit the numbers. But there's no fire behind it. No deep commitment. No identity wrapped up in the outcome. Old school lifters weren't hobbyists. They were bodybuilders. That was their identity, their community, their life. When training is your identity, you don't skip. You don't half rep. You don't make excuses. You show up and you execute. That level of commitment compensates for a lot of theoretical inefficiency. So let's bring this home. Were old school training methods optimal? No. Science has shown better ways to program volume, frequency, exercise selection. Modern periodization models are smarter on paper. Recovery science is more sophisticated. All of that is true. But results aren't just science. Results are science plus execution plus environment plus consistency. Old school bodybuilders crush the execution variables. They train with intensity modern lifters rarely match. They showed up consistently for years, not months. They existed inside a culture that demanded effort and punished weakness. And that cultural enforcement created results that science alone can't explain. A perfect program executed poorly loses to an imperfect program executed with relentless intensity every single time. That's the lesson modern lifters miss while chasing optimal splits and perfect macros. Old school bodybuilders proved something science still struggles to quantify. Effort matters more than optimization. Consistency beats perfection. Culture enforces what motivation cannot. And the body adapts to challenge, not theory. They didn't have the best information. They had something better. They had standards. They had accountability. They had an identity built on showing up and doing the work. That combination built legends. Men who trained wrong on paper but won everything in practice. The real question isn't why their methods work despite being wrong. The real question is why modern methods often fail despite being right. And the answer is simple. Knowledge without execution is useless. Perfect programs without intensity are wasted. You can train optimally and build nothing. Or you can train hard, consistently, inside a culture that demands effort and build something legendary. Old school bodybuilders chose the second path. And the stages they dominated, the physiques they built, the legacy they left, that's the proof. If you want to train like them, you don't need to copy their exact programs. You need to copy their standards. Show up when you don't feel like it. Push harder than feels comfortable. Surround yourself with people who demand effort. Measure what matters and ignore the rest. Build systems that remove excuses. Make training part of your identity, not just your schedule. That's how you win. Not by finding the perfect program, but by executing an imperfect one with perfect consistency. Old school bodybuilders knew that, and now you do too.